Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me here live. And those of you who are in the virtual audience, thank you for joining me as well for this MedComms networking event. Today, my presentation is going to be on effective education. If it's not planned from the start, the results won't magically appear in the end. And my name is Celeste Kolanko, and I'm the Managing Director of PCM Scientific. We are a certified medical education provider located in London, and we receive grants and arm's length funding from pharmaceutical companies for our medical education programs. So as the title suggested, if it's not planned from the start, the results don't magically appear. When you're at the starting line, you really do have to concentrate on what the finish line is, just like any athlete. Just like any performer, they want to know what's at the end before they even begin. There are definitely some elements of effective education, and these areas are that it really has to be needs-based. So if there's no need, why have the education? It needs to be interactive, practical. Again, people are busy today, especially medical professionals. If it's not practical, they won't attend, they won't utilize it. And bite-sized portions of information, no overwhelming amounts of information. We have information overload all the time in our daily lives. The same thing happens with education. Need it bite-sized, chunked, small. And finally, and most importantly, and I think this is one of the areas that people tend to miss, is reflection. Giving the learners the opportunity to reflect on what they've actually learned. So when you're preparing a medical education program, there are really 4 steps to achieving a practice-changing educational program or event. It's broken down, it's really relatively simple. We have a needs assessment and learning objectives, educational design, and evaluation. And it is a cyclical process. And I'm going to go into these a little bit more in detail. So our needs assessment stage, defining the need. What are the gaps? Are there educational gaps? Learning gaps? How do you do a needs assessment? It's different for all areas. Obviously in CME, for an accredited program, it's a vital part of the accredited program. But I challenge everyone who creates any type of medical education, whether it's accredited or not, to really assess the need for the education ahead of time. There are a variety of different ways of doing this. So, a needs assessment really assesses knowledge about clinical practice, and it validates any educational needs and any practice gaps. So many of us kind of know what we should know. We have experts in the field that say this is what our learners should know, but a needs assessment actually validates that and makes sure that what you think you don't know is actually what you don't know. Market research, interviews, literature search and literature reviews, surveys, focus groups, self-assessments, any or all of these in combination can be done to create a needs assessment. But then how do learning needs really relate to our clinical outcomes? So we have our needs assessment and we know what people don't know or what they're not doing correctly in practice, which is more likely. But then we have to kind of figure out, well, what do we want to achieve with our learning program? So Professor Donald Moore from Vanderbilt University has come up with what has been termed in the medical education field Moore's levels. And it looks at the different levels to achieve in an educational program. And anything as far down is participation. Do you want people just merely to show up and be there? And sometimes that might be your overall objective. Or, was I satisfied? But most areas really, we want them to learn something. So we want them to gain knowledge. It'd be really great if we can say, I'm now competent because of this. I actually know how to do something, not just know it knowledge base, but I can actually put it into practice. And then performance gain. I'm actually doing this. I'm actually utilizing what I've learned from this educational program. And finally, patient health. Are my patients getting better because of what I've learned? And community health. Has this affected the whole community health and public health issue? So again, I recommend that take a look at these Moore's levels before you set out your program, because you want to design some learning objectives and figure out what you want your learners to learn. And deciding right up front, again, looking at that finish line, what outcome do I want to have when my learners are finished? After you've decided what type of outcome you want, then you need to look at setting learning objectives. What's expected from those outcomes? And then in third place, you want to choose the educational format. So this educational design is really, really crucial and important. After you've had your needs assessment, you've decided what your learning objectives are, you need to design the activity using the format that will best deliver the objectives. So we want to look at the different types of learning preferences. There are actually 4 different types of ways that people learn. Their learning preferences are visual, auditory, kinesthetic, but broken down a little further. We either need to see it, we need to hear it, we need to read about it, or we actually have to do something with it. And these, all good teaching utilizes at least 2 of these different types of modalities, because all learners, while there might be one dominant area, at least 60% of learners actually have 2 preferences that they use. So the more of these different elements of learning preferences that you can incorporate, the more effective your education will be. Utilize all of these different methods, or at least a minimum of 2 when it's at all possible. And the optimal learning window is really relatively brief. 15, 20 minutes, just like these presentations and programs today. That's what's most vital, is giving people in short bursts what they need to know. What are the key messages that you want them to walk away with? What learning objectives do you want them to hit? I would suggest not having too many learning objectives, because again, all of that noise, we want people to walk away with learning what's really, really important and valuable, and that they can use in their everyday practice. So when you think about it, when education doesn't match the learning preferences, you've got some very, very disinterested learners. And how many of all of us have attended events where we've seen the sage on the stage who's just talked to us for hours on end, and what did you really remember when you walked away? Probably not a whole lot. But if you've had something where you've been able to participate, or it hits your learning style, you've probably walked away with quite a bit. Interactivity and flexibility are at the heart of all effective programs. So flexibly designed materials, not one size fits all, that can be utilized in different formats or for different types of learning styles. Education delivered in an interactive way, and this can be done live and online, and it can be done in small groups, and it can be done in very, very large settings, congresses with a large number of attendees. There's opportunities to add interactivity and have people communicate with each other and learn other than just the didactic format. So when you put the flexibly designed materials and the interactive formats together, that's how you get your programs that match your individual learning preferences and much more effective outcomes in the end, in your finish line. How is effective education measured? Okay, so now you've done your needs assessment, you have your learning objectives, you have a fantastic educational design, but what does it all really mean? we have to evaluate what really happened. Did anybody actually learn something? They went to this great program, what good was it? So effective measurement is very important in measuring your learning objectives. Again, I would highly recommend that you think about what you're measuring from the very, very start when you're learning objectives. Is it something, when you're creating those learning objectives, can I measure this? Can I figure out, I wanted them to do A, and when I walked away, I can measure if they're doing A. There are a variety of different tools to measure. It can be a simple post-test, which is very, very common. A rating scale, what did you think? A little more objective. You can give a case study and ask healthcare professionals what they would do based on the case study, based on what they've learned. And then most importantly, all good education has some time for reflection. So giving the healthcare professional time to think about what they have learned, how they might utilize this in their practice, and giving them that time to say, am I doing this now? Should I be doing this? How can I improve? And how can I plan to utilize this education going forward? So this brings us back to our circular 4-step process. Our needs assessment, defining the need and what are the gaps. The learning objectives, setting the objectives and what are the expected outcomes. Our educational design and the design of the activity, what format will best deliver those objectives. Evaluating what really happens and measuring that effectiveness. And again, this is a cyclical process because you will learn things from your evaluation that gives you a brand new needs assessment, and you get to start and brand new programs all over again. So I'd just like to take a moment today to challenge all of you to think about the last educational activity that you participated in. Did it have an impact on you? Did you learn anything? Why? Why not? I'm just going to ask you to reflect on that today. And nobody has to mention anything, but think about that. And the next time you're creating an educational program, think about those things that were important to you and look for that impact in your own education. I'd like to thank you for your time and thank you to the group. And if you have any questions, there's my contact information.